Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily. The request from an accused killer of Georgia beauty queen Tara Grinstead, how Ryan Deuce could now have state funds to help in his defense. And arrests made in the assault of U.S. Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, who died of his injuries from the deadly insurrection. Why the suspects are not yet facing murder charges. Plus, jury selection in the Derek Chauvin trial continues. A new motion to delay and move by the defense after news of a $27 million settlement to George Floyd's family. The judge now considering and planning to re-question jurors. Law and Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmire along with Terri Austin. Week 2 of jury selection is underway in the Derek Chauvin trial, the former Minneapolis cop charged with murdering George Floyd. Law and Crime's Kim Johnson is in front of the Hennepin County Courthouse and has the latest for us.
That's right, Brian. Jury selection does continue on this day 6 of the murder trial for Derek Chauvin, and it's been a busy day, both with more jurors being selected as well as a motion by the defense to change the venue of a court, claiming that last week's announcement of that $27 million settlement given to the George Floyd family could potentially impact jurors and prospective jurors' opinions of this case. I can tell you that the challenges of finding jurors so far who have not formed strong opinions has already been evident right off the bat. The first juror questioned Monday immediately admitted to hearing about last week's wrongful death settlement on the radio Friday. She said that she assumed the city settled out of court because they couldn't prove their case in court. She also didn't think that she could be a fair juror. Take a listen to what she told Judge Peter Cahill.
I mean, when I heard that, I almost gasped the amount. Okay. And so I would like to think of myself as somebody who tries to be impartial, but I've just been exposed to so much information. And when that happened, it leaned me so far to one side over the other that I couldn't say under oath that I'd be able to take that out of my mind.
I'm going to excuse you from this panel, so I appreciate your honesty and your candor on this.
Now, as for the 2 new jurors seated Monday, one is a black man in his 30s, works in the banking industry. He supports Black Lives Matter and says he didn't think Derek Chauvin set out to intentionally harm anyone that day, and also said he wonders why the other 3 officers didn't step in. The other juror seated Monday is a white single mom in her 50s. She works in healthcare. When asked about Black Lives Matter in her questionnaire, she wrote that she believes all lives matter. She says she has seen the video of George Floyd's death, but couldn't watch the whole thing because it was, quote, too disturbing. So to recap where the jury sits on day 6, we have 5 jurors who are white, 2 are black, 1 Hispanic, and 1 describes herself as mixed racially. That's according to how the court says that they identified in their jury survey. 6 of the jurors are men, 3 are women. Brian?
Thanks, Kim. Derek Chauvin's defense team has asked to delay the trial or move it to another county after news broke of the settlement paid by the city of Minneapolis to George Floyd's family. Law and Crime's Angenette Levy is here to explain what happened.
Yeah, Brian, news of that settlement spread around the world very quickly. It made international news, and it really has Derek Chauvin's defense attorneys concerned that it could convince jurors that he's guilty before any of the evidence has been presented in court.
I am gravely concerned with the news that broke on Friday relevant to the civil settlement in this case.
Derek Chauvin's attorney asked for several remedies, including delaying the trial, moving it to another county, giving the defense more strikes to eliminate jurors, or sequestering the jurors immediately.
The fact that this came in the exact middle of jury selection, it's perplexing to me, Your Honor, that whose idea it was to release this information when it was released.
George Floyd's family appeared at a press conference to announce the settlement with their lawyers and the mayor of Minneapolis and members of city council, including the son of Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, whose office is prosecuting Chauvin.
In terms of the sort of inference that this was somehow coordinated by the state of Minnesota. It wasn't.
You would agree it's unfortunate, wouldn't you?
That it's unfortunate?
That we have this reported all over the media when we're in the midst of jury selection as far as timing.
Yeah, it's certainly not my preference, Your Honor. I don't even know which way that cuts. If that cuts for us, if that cuts against us. You know, some jurors
The problem is it cuts.
What's that?
The problem is it cuts.
The state objected to a continuance or increasing the number of strikes allowed for the defense.
And I wish people would, city officials would stop talking about this case so much, but at the same time, I don't find any evil intent that they are trying to tamper with this criminal case.
Now, Judge Cahill did not rule on the defense request to continue the trial or on the change of venue motion, but obviously he is moving forward with jury selection at this time. He said he may dismiss more jurors for cause, but he is not going to increase the number of strikes that the defense has, and he will call back those first 7 jurors for additional questioning to see whether or not that civil settlement has impacted their ability to be impartial. Brian?
Thanks, Angenette. Joining us today is civil rights and criminal defense attorney Melba Pearson and Terri Austin. Melba, $27 million with $500,000 going to the community where Floyd died in. How big of a win is that in the civil rights community, and what does the timing in relationship to the trial mean to you?
So this is a huge win in some respects for the civil rights community because, number one, it showed that George Floyd's life mattered, that the city knows that there was no way they were going to be able to win this case other than to be able to do a settlement. And it also clearly sends a message to the people watching, everybody around the country, that police brutality is not something that's going to be stood for, and that there's real consequences. Now, what I think the civil rights folks want to see most, they want to see Chauvin convicted. They want to see the other 3 officers that were involved in this incident, in this murder, they want to see them held accountable as well. So the money on one hand is good, but the criminal accountability is what everybody is waiting for. Now, the timing of the settlement was very unfortunate. I think it's just a matter of, and I agree with the judge on this, I think it was just a matter of the city and the civil side does not speak to the prosecutors or the criminal side. So they had no real understanding of the gravity of them releasing this in the middle of jury selection.
Absolutely. Now, Terri, I totally get the change of venue, but like I said, it's international news. Where are they going to go where they're not going to hear about this settlement?
Brian, there's nowhere they can go where they're not going to hear about this settlement. So I think that this continuing ask for change of venue is never going to succeed. But I do think the judge is listening to the defense as far as hearing about the $27 million settlement. And the fact that the judge did say he might consider calling back the 7 jurors. And I listened today, the judge is asking the new prospective jurors about the fact that this settlement came out. So he's listening.
Absolutely. Now, Angenette, it was sort of a quiet first week of jury selection, but that changed this week, right?
Yeah, that's right, Brian. On the day the jury selection was supposed to begin and then it was delayed that past Monday, there were a throng of protesters there. A couple of different rallies held at the courthouse. Then things tapered off, and the additional 4 days of the week, it was very quiet. It was almost eerily quiet outside of the courthouse, and one day it was pouring down rain, so you can understand why people wouldn't be coming out. But today, a big group of protesters actually returned and shut down part of the street outside of the courthouse. But, you know, there were no incidents, no arrests made. They were peaceful, but obviously they were coming out to show their support for the prosecution in this case as jury selection proceeds.
And probably more of that as we get closer and closer to that March 29th date. Thank you, everyone. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, the bold request from one of the defendants in the murder of a Georgia beauty queen. But first, what an expert can and cannot testify to in the trial of Derek Chauvin, accused of murdering George Floyd. Our legal analysis next. Welcome back. It appears Derek Chauvin's trial could come down to a battle of the experts. Angenette Levy is here to tell us about the arguments over one such expert.
Yeah, Brian, nearly every day before jury selection begins, there are motions that the defense and the prosecution argue in front of Judge Cahill. Prosecutors are arguing to limit the testimony of one key defense expert.
Experts in toxicology and forensic pathology will testify for the state and the defense about what they believe caused George Floyd's death. Prosecutors asked to bar Dr. David Fowler from testifying about some parts of his report because he consulted with 13 other experts in different fields.
What the state is worried about is that Dr. Fowler can't serve as the mouthpiece for other experts.
Dr. Fowler is a former medical examiner and works for the forensic panel in New York, and the 13 experts he consulted signed on to his report.
And ultimately, that's what Dr. Fowler does, is he is investigating a death. He is submitting information to other experts.
The defense likens it to a peer review process and getting other experts to weigh in to form one opinion.
You would agree that your testifying witness cannot indirectly give the opinions of those who are not present.
Absolutely.
Okay.
They are his opinions.
Cause of death will be the central question in the trial. Hennepin County's medical examiner ruled Floyd's death a homicide caused by cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating law enforcement subdual, restraint, and neck compression. Chauvin will argue that Floyd died of a drug overdose. In the end, Judge Cahill ruled Dr. Fowler can testify about his opinion about Floyd's cause of death.
He will be limited in his testimony to what falls within the expertise of a forensic pathologist. Anything beyond that, even if it was one of the other experts on this panel, he will not be allowed to talk about.
Now, there was also some discussion about the prosecution wanting to call a forensic psychiatrist to testify about George Floyd possibly exhibiting some symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder in those body camera videos. The defense argued against that, and Judge Cahill said that forensic psychiatrist could certainly testify about Floyd possibly exhibiting symptoms of a panic attack or claustrophobia, but he would not, or that expert would not be able to testify about PTSD because there was nothing in the medical records to back up that claim. Brian?
Thanks, Angenette. Here to discuss the court's ruling is civil rights and criminal defense attorney Melba Pearson and Terri Austin. Terri, off the top, was this the right ruling from the judge? Can the expert give opinions based on their expertise and not those he consulted?
You know, I think we have the exact right judge for this case. Cahill is being very careful with his decisions. He's not eliminating any of the expert, but he is saying that you are limited to talking about your area of expertise. Of course, you can be influenced by others, but at the end of the day, you have to talk about your area. And here he said that Dr. Fowler is a forensic pathologist. He can talk about that. And even though he had a peer review for this morbidity and mortality conference, he has to limit his testimony to just what he knows and to his opinion. So I think he's making the right decision on this expert and the others he's talked about as well.
Yeah, Melba, it kind of sounds like he's just, I don't know, following the law. I can talk about my expertise in criminal defense, but I can't talk about an expertise in, I don't know, immigration law. I don't have it. Now, is this greatly going to limit the defense's argument, or does this mean we're just going to see a lot of experts testify?
Yeah, I don't think that this is going to limit the defense at all. I think that basically they're now just going to, it actually helps them to a certain degree because now they can put on more experts and basically have each expert talk about their narrow area of expertise or what they worked on in relation to this case. However, what's going to be critical is that the judge is going to have to keep an eye on how many experts they want to bring in. So it's not a situation where you have 20 defense experts to counter one medical examiner, and the new experts they're bringing in are not adding more value or adding more information to help the jury make a decision, as opposed to it just being a show of force type of thing. So the judge is going to have to keep a very close eye on that. But I don't think it limits the defense at all.
Now, Angenette, we went from 7 to 9 jurors from the first week to now starting the second week. How do you see the jury kind of shaping up?
You know, Brian, I think we could have it possibly a jury by the end of this week at the pace that things are moving. We're just going to have to wait and see. But it's a very labor-intensive process, as we've seen over the last week or so. They take about an hour to question these jurors. The judge is also questioning the jurors. He may dismiss more of the jurors for cause because of news of that civil settlement. But I think it's entirely possible we'll have a jury by the end of the week.
I'm not only hoping that we have a jury by the end of the week, but I'm hoping that this judge decides to have more alternates. I know I keep going on and on about this, but 2 alternates in a case like this, that's crazy. So we'll see how the judge goes.
It does seem like too few, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic, 3 jurors come out and then mistrial. But we'll see how this goes. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, 2 men now charged with attacking an officer killed in the Capitol riot. Plus, an update in the murder of a Georgia beauty queen. One of the defendants seeked help in his representation. Does his request stand a chance? Find out next. We're back. One of the defendants charged in the murder of a Georgia beauty queen is now entitled to state funds to help in his representation. Teacher and pageant competitor Tara Grinstead died in October of 2005. Ryan Duke is accused of killing her and burying her body along with his friend, co-defendant Bo Dukes. Bo Dukes pled guilty in 2019 to helping get rid of the body. Ryan Duke is being represented by private attorneys, but they're working for free. His defense requested government money to hire investigators and experts on his behalf. Prosecutors objected, saying he chose not to be represented by court-appointed public defenders. Georgia Supreme Court now says the district court erred in siding with the prosecution. The state's high court ruled that Duke's pro bono representation entitles him to state funds in his defense. A trial date has yet to be set. Back to discuss a state court's ruling is civil rights and criminal defense attorney Melba Pearson and co-host Terri Austin. Melba, this is a perfect week to discuss indigent defense as it's 58 years since Gideon v. Wainwright, the landmark case that created public defenders like me. Where do you fall in this debate of private pro bono attorney getting state funds to help represent their client?
Well, at the end of the day, what it always focuses on is whether or not the defendant is indigent, whether or not the person has any money and can fund their own defense. Clearly, even though it's a defense team that's private and has a lot of resources, the defendant in and of himself does not have money to fund his own defense. So that is basically the textbook definition of Gideon, and that's what the higher court looked at in making this ruling. So I think that he is well within his right, because if you had a public defender or any other type of indigent defense attorney that was handling this case, you know, they would be entitled to get money from the state to be able to conduct the defense. So there's nothing different about the scenario other than the fact that these defense attorneys are doing this for free, pro bono.
Yeah,
I think the court made the right ruling.
Yeah, Terri, they're pretty much looking at Gideon to decide this. Do you think the state Supreme Court got it right?
Well, not only is the state Supreme Court right, but Melba's right as well. I think this was the right decision. If a defendant who's indigent has a constitutional right to state-funded experts, there's no reason this defendant should not have that same right. Only because he's using a pro bono lawyer, that makes no difference. So it was the right decision, Brian.
Yeah, we'll see how this plays out. And of course, if there's going to be more of this situation of private attorneys taking pro bono clients and getting state funds, I don't know, maybe it saves money, maybe it exhausts more money. We'll see how that plays out. When we come back, months after the deadly insurrection at the Capitol, new arrests, the arrested suspects accused of spraying a fallen officer in the face. The charges when we come back. Welcome back. A Washington State woman is accused of killing her baby 2 decades ago. Investigators say her DNA helped lead to her arrest. Police in Seattle reinvestigating the death of a newborn baby found at a gas station say the suspect uploaded their own DNA to a database. A grainy surveillance image from 1997 shows a woman detectives say dumped her baby boy's body in a trash can. Investigators believe the baby was born alive in the gas station's bathroom. The baby's DNA was uploaded into the Washington State Crime Lab. The case was reopened in 2018, and investigators say they got a hit to Christine Maureen Warren. Warren reportedly opted to not make her data private. She was arrested and is facing second-degree murder. 2 suspects are facing charges for the deadly assault of Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick during the January 6th insurrection. The FBI says a tipster led them to George Pierretanos and Julian Cater. The men are believed to have grown up together in New Jersey. According to court records, Cater can be seen in a video posted on social media reaching into Tanos' backpack and asking for bear spray. Then, around 2:30 p.m., body-worn cameras and surveillance videos reportedly showed 3 officers, including Sicknick, reacting to a chemical substance being sprayed in their eyes by Cater. Sicknick died from his injuries sustained that day. The 2 men are facing 9 charges of assault, conspiracy to injure, and civil disorder. Mel, but the interesting part here is this case was investigated as a homicide by a fire extinguisher, and now it's an assault with bear spray. Is that odd or just how investigations go?
I think it's a bit odd, but then again, we have not had a insurrection / riot / attempted coup in this country in hundreds of years, and certainly not at our nation's capital. So I think that the investigators wanted to make sure to get some charges on the books to be able to arrest these 2 defendants, and they always have the option of being able to add or change the indictment or the charging document to add homicide charges later. But at least this allows them to be taken into custody and to start to face accountability for their actions on that day. But as more information comes to light, as more informants come forward, as more witnesses come forward, then the case for murder becomes a lot stronger. And maybe that's what the investigators are betting on at this point.
Yeah, I would agree, Terry. For me, I think maybe the missing link is the cause of death. That's always something that we're looking for in these types of cases. As Melba said, could that potentially come down the road with further investigation?
Well, Brian, that's exactly why they have not charged murder here. They don't have that missing link. The medical examiner is going to have to come out and say this was the cause of his death. And until they do that, the prosecution can't charge.
Thank you, guys. And thank you for joining us here at Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.